You're listening to New Churches Podcast, a production of Send Network on newchurches.com. We discuss all things church planting. If you're looking to take your next step toward multiplication, you're in the right place. Newchurches.com provides relevant and reliable resources for church planters, church multipliers, and disciple makers. Our growing library features pastors, planters, and church leaders like Ed Stetzer, David Platt, Trillia Newbell, Christine Hoover, Dahadi Lewis, Trevin Wax, and many others.
Welcome back to the New Churches Podcast. My name is Noah Oldham, and I'm here again with Vance Pitman and Scott Thomas. Excited to be with you guys again. How we feeling?
We're excited to have Scott back on with the podcast today. Excited about us continuing to talk about this subject matter that we are all so well versed in. Mistakes that leaders have made, and all of us as leaders have made plenty of them. And hopefully, Scott, today as you and I have this conversation, there's some other leaders coming up behind us that maybe can learn from some of our mistakes and not have to make the same ones again.
Yeah, we paid the tax on it. They might as well win on it. Yeah. Exactly. Thank you for having me.
Well, by way of reminder for our audience, Vance is the founding pastor of Hope Church in Las Vegas, a speaker, author, and the president of Send Network. And Scott, too, is an author, speaker, and pastor, having also served at the top level of leadership in Acts 29 and C2C networks. And in our last episode, we spoke about mistakes that leaders make. And you each had a ton of insight, having served as and among leaders now for decades. But in today's episode, I want us to talk about how a leader should respond. When you fail as a leader, what should be your next step? What should be your response? And Vance, you've got a grid by which you look at this. We'd love to have you start us off in that conversation.
Yeah, sure, Noah. And talking about this, let me first of all make an important distinction. There are leadership failures that are disappointments. And then there are leadership failures that disqualify us. And what I'm about to talk about and the filter that I use really deals with that first category. It's leadership mistakes that don't disqualify a leader, but they are mistakes that we make that we have to learn from and we have to navigate through. And we've all seen it in the last several years, those kind of leadership mistakes that actually disqualify somebody from ministry. That's an entirely different category, and there needs to be a separate conversation about how you navigate that and what that looks like to see restoration take place. But when we make just one of those mistakes that we make as a leader that we're all going to make, it's part of being human, they're kind of a fourfold filter that I use in my own life to try to navigate through those mistakes. And it's simply four little phrases: own it, admit it, reconcile it, and fix it. Own it, admit it, reconcile it, and fix it. And let me just define those quickly. And then, Scott, I'd love to have your input on any of this, your thoughts. But own it is really that idea that says, I recognize that I messed up. It's an internal acknowledgement where I come to grips with it. Man, I made a mistake here. My flesh wants to conceal it, excuse it, justify it, cover it up, hide it. But there has to be an ownership of it. And admitting it, secondly, is external. It's recognizing that the mistake that I made affects more than just me personally. It has an external effect. And so I need to admit that. And admitting it requires an element of humility. It allows others to learn from my mistake, and it gives others the freedom to fail. When you as a leader admit you made a mistake, it gives other people, it creates an atmosphere that allows them to know failure is okay. We all make mistakes. And if you don't allow for that, it doesn't give room. The third is to reconcile it. You got to own it internally. You got to admit it externally. You got to reconcile it. And this is the heart attitude that recognizes that sometimes those mistakes that we make hurt other people. Those failures have hurt people, and you need to do what you can to reconcile that. Following Jesus is all about relationships, and so we need to pursue reconciliation in those relationships. Now, sometimes all you can do is all you can do. That's why Paul said, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Sometimes you can't reconcile things, but to the degree that you can't separate spiritual leadership from relationships with those that you lead. And so we have to try to reconcile it. And then finally is fix it. And that's the hard attitude that recognizes that factors other than relationships may have been affected, and there needs to be some fixes. And so I like to think about some questions. Why did this failure happen? How did I get here? Where do we go from here? And what needs to happen to make sure we don't make this mistake again? So when I fail as a leader, own it, admit it, reconcile it, and then fix it.
Those are so good, Vance, so good. And we've seen a number of times when people have done this properly and those who have not done it properly. And what's interesting is Ed Stetzer, who's a friend of all of ours, mentioned to me about a leader, and he said, if he'll just do exactly what you said, if he would just own it, admit it, and then say, this is what I'm going to do to fix it. In other words, I'm going to change my behavior, my life, my approach. Everybody would it'd just go away. And the number of times you see that in even the secular world where, public figures will say something or do something that's wrong. And they've been instructed on how to admit it publicly, externally, not only with humility, perhaps, but they've been at least instructed that, world's wisdom, God's wisdom, isn't restricted just to the Christians, but it's going to take it and own it, and you're going to have reconciliation as a result.
I think too often in the realm of spiritual leadership, we embrace this idea that we have to be Superman with the S on our chest and the cape in the wind, and we don't allow for the reality that we all make mistakes. We are going to fail people. We are going to let you down. We are going to hurt other people, and we have to be willing to admit that. And I think sometimes, I know in my own personal experience, it's been through my failures and my admitting that and seeking reconciliation that sometimes some of my greatest platforms of leadership have actually taken place in those, like even in my home. It's when I've gone to my kids and said, I'm sorry, I didn't do that right as a dad. I didn't handle that right. Those are some of the most impactful leadership moments in their lives that have been recognized through my own failure. And when you think about it in Scripture, I mean, the Bible is filled with men and women of God that God used greatly, but who also made some pretty significant mistakes. But it was in their owning it, they're admitting it, they're reconciling it, they're growing from it, that God was able to use them.
Well, I think one of the things we talked about in the last episode, if listeners, you didn't get a chance to check out that episode, go back and listen to episode 1, part 1 of this, mistakes that leaders make. Scott, you said it's the failure to build a gospel culture. And if you've not built a gospel culture, then when you fail, you are afraid to admit that because all you have in your mind is law and punishment, law and punishment. If you built a culture of gospel and grace, you can freely put those mistakes forward, knowing that you'll receive that gospel in return. Super important to build that.
Scott, you've walked with a lot of leaders in your ministry life. You've impacted so many people in so many ways. Is there something that you could give for our listeners that would be, and here are some things you can do to protect yourself from some of these mistakes? And I know on the last episode, we gave several categories, so maybe you need to talk about it in the context of categories. But are there any advice you could give to somebody that could keep them from making some of these mistakes, just kind of in a broad brush, that might be helpful for somebody, some church planner who's listening to this?
Well, the first thing we've got to do to Noah's point, talking about some kind of a culture, is to be able to say, hey, we're going to try some things as a church, as a leadership. We're going to try some things that are not going to win. We're going to fail at some point. And knowing that we don't have to win on everything, not everything we touch needs to turn to gold. We need to try some things because we're willing to put ourselves out there, try an opportunity, try this event, try this, whatever. And we just got to it's not everything's going to turn to gold. And we can't kick ourselves down and put our head down and say, well, I'm not going to try anymore. But we've got to be able to put ourselves out there, trying to do something. The first pastor I ever worked for I was a youth pastor, 19 years old, believe it or not. And he said, if we're not trying something and if we're not failing, then we're not trying enough. We're not attempting something great for God. And I'll never forget that because it wasn't something I expected him to say. But kind of try something, do something, be okay to not fail at some point. No, what I'm talking about is ministry. And sometimes that's where it begins. We didn't succeed in the ministry. In other words, we planned for 1,000 and we had 200 show up, or whatever the situation was. So that's where it starts. And then people begin to grumble and they begin to complain and they start to point fingers instead of hey, we all tried this. This is what we did. And we're going to try something else, and it may fail as well. But we're going to keep trying and ask the Lord to continue to bless this. So it's just have this spirit of entrepreneurial, got to try it. Not everything's going to win 100%.
It's good.
Yeah, Scott, one of the things that I've heard you talk about in Gospel Coach, in one of the books that you read, I know you have a new book, The Gospel Shaped Life, but it's this concept of living out what you say you believe. What do you see with leaders who are making these mistakes perpetually and on and on? What is the disconnect between what they preach and what they believe, and how do they short circuit that so that it flows one to the other?
Yeah, that's a great insight. It comes down to, I think, they're pastors by nature, I believe, are insecure, and I are one.
Yeah.
So there's that insecurity that's built in, for some reason, it's built into that thing. And we're dealing with people that are volunteering and they're giving of their donations, and you never know what's going to happen. So you live on the edge at all times. And so it's afraid to make a mistake and afraid to own it, as Vance said, and especially admit it, because that may drop down our level of respect among people, and they could just step out or begin to take shots at us. So it's that insecurity and going like, I am secure in my relationship with Christ. He's called me to this great endeavor, and we're going to go for it. And by admitting it as a big, huge thing. And I've been a part of Emmanuel Nashville for 10 years, and we had this mantra Ray Ortland started, and it started this way. Number one, there was three things. Number one, I'm a complete idiot. Now, just starting right there is saying I'm a complete idiot. And we sometimes would say that in meetings, staff meetings or elder meetings, just somebody would point something out and go, man, I'm a complete idiot. It just gave permission to say we're not perfect. And he said the second thing is that, but God has a beautiful plan for our life. And then the third one is anybody can get in on it. But that first piece of it, like, just recognize we're not perfect. Quit trying to do that. Ray will often said we can be, Ray Ortland I'm speaking of, he said we can either be impressive or we can be known.
Wow. So true. My goodness. Scott, you and Vance both. Vance, you talked about the difference between the mistakes. You got the disappointing mistakes, the mistakes that disappoint. Then you got the mistakes that disqualify. And there's a difference there. But what I've seen over the years is those mistakes that disqualify, they don't happen overnight. They're not out of nowhere. There's often warning signs for months, if not years. I remember when I was learning to drive and my dad pointed out the lights on the dashboard. He called them dummy lights. I was like, why are they called that? He says, because if you don't listen to them, you're a dummy, because very soon something worse is going to happen in your car. In the same way, we have these signs in a leader's life. So I would love to hear from both of you. Speak to some of these lights that you've seen come on in leaders' lives that come on early, that if they address it now, it can be dealt with. But if they don't, it'll probably lead to some greater failure down the road.
Noah, just hearing you ask that question, I'm immediately thinking about the psalmist when in Psalm 19, the psalmist said, keep back your servant also from presumptuous sins. Do not let them rule over me, for then I will be blameless. Then I will be acquitted of great transgression. We all want to avoid the great transgression, but the psalmist began by saying, protect me from the presumptuous sins. Those things that I don't even think are things. Those things that in arrogance, I just step right past those things. The wrong word to my spouse, the bad attitude towards my kids, the neglecting of my time alone with the Father, the prioritizing ministry over intimacy. Those little things add up over time, and that's what leads. Nobody ever woke up and said, man, I want to ruin my marriage, have an affair, get addicted to this, or nobody. But it was the little things that we ignored, and that's why the psalmist said, God, keep me back there. The next verse, he really emphasizes it. He says, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable. We want to focus on how do I not make the big mistake? Here's what he says. You focus on the words and the meditation of your heart, You go there,
It's good.
you'll prevent the big mistake. Like the big mistake never happens if the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart are pleasing to the Father. That's where we win the real victory, is just in our own words and meditations.
What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, humility and pride and entitlement, narcissism, all comes down. C.S. Lewis said, according to Christian teachers, the essential vice, the utmost evil is pride. Then he said something funny. Unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness, and all that, no, those are bad things, he said, are all mere flea bites in comparison. It was through pride that the devil became the devil. Pride leads to every other vice. It's the complete anti-God state of mind. So it's at some reason, I don't understand it, why people would take pride in, they take credit for things that are happening in the church, and particularly church planting, because, man, you're getting this thing started from the ground up. You're starting in the living rooms, most likely. You're building up leaders. You're pouring into it. Now, all of a sudden, you've got something really good. And, I mean, you get to 200 and think, man, we've really accomplished something. And God said, I'm just starting. I haven't even got my core group pulled together yet. That 200 is not even the core group. I have something greater in mind. Don't take credit. And if we take credit, we just stop the progress.
Yeah.
It's given God the praise, the glory, everything is pouring into him, and become focused in. I saw this happen to a leader. When success came, narcissism began to really grow. Now, it was already there, but it began to grow, and then it overtook him, and it took him down and defeated him completely.
Wow.
Noah, hearing him mention the word pride there made me think of, I like to say that humility says, God, I need you. Pride, even though we'd never say this out of our mouths, what it really says is, God, I don't need you. Wow. And when we begin to function, we would never say that. But what happens with success is we begin to put our trust not in the God that did the work, but in the play that we ran. And we begin to put the confidence in the play that we ran, the program that we installed, the system that we plugged in. That's when we begin to say, God, I don't need you. We begin to function. It's like that. We talked about the mistakes in the last episode, prayerlessness. How does the church ever get to the place where we don't pray?
Yeah.
Well, we don't pray because we get confident in ourselves. We begin to say, God, I don't need you. So I think he's spot on that this issue of pride and humility, it's a heart issue. We're talking about a heart issue.
The wisdom of grandparenting, right? Vance, you with me? There's
Yeah,
wisdom that we grow from that. And I had my grandkid pushing him around in a wheelbarrow, and we were going around the yard, and then we stopped, and he wanted to push it. And of course, he's just 18 months old, and he couldn't push it because he couldn't lift up on the little handles there to get the weight off of the back so the wheel would turn. And so he's pushing and he can't do it. And so behind him, I lifted up the weight off that wheelbarrow, and now he's pushing it. And he turns around, he's smiling at me, thinking he's big stuff because he's moving this big wheelbarrow going forward. He's taking all the credit for what's taking place, but yet I'm the one that's holding it up. And, God, working with God, it's that way. It's like he's the one lifting it up. He lets us, though, participate in it, and he's gracious with us as we push it, and we sometimes take credit. And he said, I'm going to let it down just to remind you it's not you.
It's good. Vance, you have this phrase that I've heard you say a number of times, and it hits me every time I hear it. You say that you've never seen a guy have an affair in the ministry that didn't first have an affair with the ministry. I think one of those dummy lights. What is it for that? What are the signs that a guy's about to have an affair with the ministry?
When ministry becomes my excuse to avoid and escape intimacy with the Father, it's gotten out of bounds. And what happens for so many of us is ministry is good, like it's good stuff. When I begin to justify the good, I'm living the Martha syndrome. I'm justifying what is good to the exclusion of what is best, which is intimacy with the Father. The illustration that Scott just used of his grandkid, I love that. But here's the beauty. the grandkid was doing it, but the grandfather was doing it through him. It was the grandson was just as much a part of that, but the strength was in the father, the grandfather. We get to participate in what we get to co-labor with Christ, but it's Christ in us working through us. And everything he desires to do through us, he'll do out of the overflow of what he's doing in us. So the warning sign is when I look back over the last week, the last month, and I'm making conscious choices to do ministry as a substitute for pursuing intimacy with Christ, and I've begun to justify that, that should be a major warning signal that I'm headed to a dangerous place.
Yeah. Well, Jesus said when they asked him, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. Yeah. And he said, and the second is likened unto it, love your neighbors yourself. But he said it's second as opposed to what was first. So ministry sometimes becomes first, and second on that list is ministry, even our marriage, our kids, our hobbies, our working out. All of that is secondary to loving the Lord with such great passion and abandonment. That's what he's called us to, and that's the Shema that was recited twice a day by the Jewish people.
So good.
It's so good. Brothers, this is great wisdom for all those just getting started in the church planting world. The hope is that so many church planters, all of them, would finish well. This kind of wisdom is going to help them do just that. Thanks for listening. Join us again on another episode of New Churches Podcast.
You've been listening to the New Churches Podcast, brought to you by Send Network. If you like what you heard, take a few minutes to rate and review us or share this episode with a friend. It's the best way to show your support. To find more reliable resources to start your new church well, visit newchurches.com.